All right, guys, I have had some questions about my linseed oil tank. Every so often I mention it in a video and I will share a little bit of information about it, but I don't know that I have covered the whole thing. So the tank that I'm talking about is this thing. You can see how it's getting all grimy and dirty just because some of the linseed oil will drip on the outside, and it doesn't really hurt the function so much, but it does look ugly. And you've been asking questions, so I thought, why not change it out? So this part here is just a rubber expansion topper cap that you can get at any of the big box stores. They're not cheap, but it works so well because you can pop that in there, you can turn that thing tight, and after you get that nice and tight, no air can get in there and it will stay on there. So I'm going to reuse this thing, and you just gotta loosen it, pop that down, pull that out, and what we're going to do is remake the rest of this. And what it is a toilet flange. So this is a toilet flange for new construction. Normally you would put that on your toilet drain. In fact, I've got a drain right here, so you put it on your toilet drain. You'd have your floor that comes off of here. You do your construction in your bathroom, and when you're ready to seat the toilet, you take a hammer and you tap this center part out. Well, we're going to leave the center part in there because this I'm going to turn upside down and make it our base. That gives you something to step on when you're trying to pull this topper off, and it gives it a nice solid base. If you want a more stable base, you can make a 3/4 plywood and screw this down onto the 3/4 plywood and make that as big as you want. I find that this works pretty well. So we're going to take this, and then we're going to cut off a piece of this and attach them together, and I'll show you how it works. You can see just how dirty this base is as well, so there's no guarantee that the new one's not going to get dirty like that as well, but we can at least change it out. So I'm going to make this 25. Now, it depends on what you want to do. I'm going to make it about 25.5 because I want a 24-inch handle and smaller to be able to be submerged in here. Now, I don't fill this any deeper than I have to, so that when a 24-inch handle is in here, it only comes within about 2.5 inches of the top, because I don't want it getting all gummed up around this rubber part here. And then I will show you, because we've got, just so happen to have, a dried out crusty handle that needs some moisture, needs some hydrating. So I'll show you how this handle, which is going to be bigger than this, will pop it in one way, and we flip it over the other way, and I'll show you how we do all of that. For right now, let's cut that off. All right, we have a deburring tool. This thing just swivels, and it's got a nice sharp little edge on it, and the end of it is a ball so that it will fit down around here, and it will take the burr out of here. All right, guys, we do not want this to leak at all, so we're going to take our purple solvent here and clean this really well. Make sure that gets in there just like we're doing some legitimate plumbing. Now let's get this all prepped. So I want the new one over here to dry real well before I put any linseed oil in it. So I want to leave that overnight. So for demonstration purposes, we're going to go ahead and use the old one so that we can keep the new one from having oil in it until later on. Now, one thing I do want to mention, when you have a tank like this, the chemical that's inside the linseed oil that causes it to dry better, that can settle down in the bottom. So anytime I put a handle down in there that hits the bottom, I stir it up. You can even take a long stick, a piece of wood or something, stick it down in there and mix it up so that that kind of stays mixed into your oil. I find they still dry. It's just good not to have. I just know that there's something that sets down the bottom. I see a lot of people, when they use the can, they shake that can up, and that's fine too. It's kind of the same principle. I like to do it this way because I don't like having it all over my hands, all over the bench. Now, some people have a raw wood bench, unfinished wood bench, and that actually helps your bench. If that's what you have, maybe that's the way you want to do it. All right, we ran out of memory on the phone and cut me off, so I'll try to pick up where I left off, and that is make sure that that's mixed up in the bottom here. So one of the things I also have is this hanging from the ceiling here on a hook, and what this is a piece of a pallet with a magnet attached to it. And I think I got the magnet in a toolbox that I bought at a pawn shop one time. And so I have that magnet here, but I also keep this wedge, this metal wedge. And so what I do is I take the handles that I'm working on, and I'll usually dip this end in first, and then I take this wedge and jam it in there. And then from the wedge, I can drop it down into the tank, and then we lift the tank up here and let that wedge stick to that magnet, and that helps to hold the handle while all the linseed oil drips back into the tank. So this is just how I do it. Let's take a look at how this might work. So like I said, we take this end first and dip it down as far as you think it needs to go to be able for the rest of it to cover the whole thing. And we'll take the wedge and jam that in there after we get it saturated. So we dunk that down in there about halfway or so, and that will drip back in there. And after that's dripped for a little while, we'll stick this wedge in here and flip it over. So let's pull this up. Drew this quickly so we don't make a big mess. There, that's in there. Drop that back in there. Now you see it's done the rest of the handle. And I'll hold that there for just a little bit. Let me adjust the camera, and I'll show you how we put it to the magnet. So we got all kinds of bubbles coming up in the tank where that oil is going into any kind of opening or crevice. That'll happen on any raw handle, but this handle has been so dried out, it is just absorbing all of that. So that wedge will stick right there to the magnet. We drop this tank down and set the tank so that it will drip nicely into the tank from the handle. Now that that handle has been completely saturated, that is absorbing all of the oil, and the rest of it is dripping right back down into the tank. I usually leave it there for about an hour. If I come back and this handle is completely dry, I'll do it again. So this handle here has been well treated. It's had a couple of dunks, and it's not absorbing any more oil, so it is completely saturated. I have two types of tanks. I do have this kind here, which has the little topper on it, and that's what we're using right now and what I'm demonstrating how to make. But I also keep one of these, an ammo can, and it is about half full of linseed oil. That way I can pop this thing open, and if I have an axe that is loose, a hammerhead that is a little bit loose or starting to get loose, you can stick it in there and let it stick the handle up, and let it saturate and get all over inside of that head. It's good for the axe head itself because it's an oil and it will protect it. It doesn't get to the point where it will inhibit the way that it functions, and when you use it, that oil comes off and you'll have to recoat it with something. But this here, you can put a loose head in. Now, if it's really, really loose, you need to fix it. But if you can just tell there's a little bit of play, you put it in there, soak it 2 or 3 days, and then what I usually do is take and try to drive the wedge in there a little bit tighter after I've wiped it all up. So that keeps that nice and tight. Your eye should stay nice and tight. The head should stay tight on your axe, hammer, sledge, whatever it is that you have. I also keep these little 1-inch brushes, these little cheapies, because when I'm doing a shovel handle or a rake handle, I can dip that down in the oil and I can use that to brush up there, because you can't stick the shovel head or the rake head or the hoe head down in there. So you stick the tail end down in there, and then you can take with this and saturate all that. You can still use the magnet for the shovel or the rake or the hoe, but that way it helps you so that you're able to get the thing saturated well with a brush. All right, this has been sitting for a while. It's pretty dry. We can take out the wedge, put the wedge back up here so that it's there for the next time. And just dry this all off as best you can, or wipe it off, I should say, not dry it off. But that is looking really, really nice now. So, we'll wipe this off. One thing I always want to remind you, when you're using linseed oil, these rags can spontaneously combust while it's drying. So always I put them in a metal coffee can in the middle of the floor, so that if it starts on fire, it will stay contained in that metal can. I really want to get a trash can with a metal lid on it so that we can keep this all contained better. But right now, it's what I have. All right, let's take the new can that's had enough time to dry. Let's go ahead and pour the linseed oil into it. So I hope that was useful. It's just my way of doing things. Having a tank that you can keep everything in, just slide it over in the corner. It doesn't take up much room. I know there's a lot of other guys that do it different ways. Skill Cult, I think, takes plastic bisqueen and rolls his handles up in that and puts linseed oil, just saturates them, rolls it all up and lets it sit for days, even weeks, I think. And he claims that when a finally breaks, the handle finally breaks when he's having to replace it, that it is saturated all the way through. I'm not looking for that. If I can get 1/8 of an inch of saturation, even 1/16 of an inch of saturation, I'm happy with that, and it makes the handle last for a whole lot longer. This here is my way of keeping it cleaned up. So if you have a bare bench and you want the linseed oil on the bench, then that's also a good way to do it. This here is just my way. Thought I'd share it with you. Hope you found it useful. Give us a thumbs up. Share this content with some friends. Come back and see us on the next video. Have a great day. God bless.